Within the perplexing domain of stolid philosophy, one rule stands out for its significant capacity to shape our enthusiastic flexibility and individual growth: the refinement between reacting and responding. It's an unobtrusive but imperative distinction that, once caught on and applied, can change how we explore life's challenges. Stoicism, a school of logic that began in antiquated Greece, teaches us that whereas we may not have control over outside events, we do have control over our reactions to those occasions. This center precept supports the stolid conviction that a life of inward peace and tranquility is possible, even within the face of external chaos. By sharpening the capacity to reply instead of react, we develop the passionate insights required to handle life's unusual nature with composure and clarity. The nature of response. Let's, to begin with, jump into what it implies to respond. Responding is an instinctive, often sincerely driven reaction to a jolt. It's what happens when somebody cuts us off in traffic, and we feel that surge of outrage that leads us to lash out, or when we get feedback and quickly feel defensive, perhaps reacting with sharp words that we afterward lament. These responses are regularly represented by our emotions, which have their roots in our survival instinctual. Anger, fear, frustration. These feelings can serve us in circumstances of prompt danger, but they frequently prevent us in daily life. Think of a time once you responded rashly to something. Maybe you spoke out in outrage or fear, or perhaps you made a rushed choice within the warmth of the minute. Often, reactions like these can lead to lament. We may harm relationships, miss opportunities, or escalate conflicts basically since we didn't take the time to evaluate the circumstance more carefully. Usually the characteristic imperfection in responsive behavior, it's nearly continuously centered on the immediate, without respect for the long-term results. The feelings driving our responses are fleeting, but their impacts can be long-lasting. In fact, unchecked responses can trap us in a cycle of negativity, making it troublesome to break free from enthusiastic instability. And whereas feelings themselves are not intrinsically bad, reacting based on those feelings without reflection can lead us off track. The craftsmanship of reacting. Now contrast this with reacting. A reaction is think. It's the result of taking a step back, evaluating the situation, and at that point, choosing the foremost suitable course of activity. When we respond, we don't allow our feelings to require the reins. Instead, we recognize our emotions, process them, and at that point, aced in arrangement with our center values and long-term goals. The impassive philosophers like Marcus Aurelius and Seneca emphasize the significance of self-awareness in this prepare. Marcus Aurelius, in his meditations, often composed almost the importance of controlling how we see occasions. You have got control over your mind, not exterior events. Realize this and you'll discover quality. This site outlines the impassive conviction that it isn't the outside occasion that inconveniences us, but our judgment of that occasion. By preparing the intellect to stop and reflect, we pick up the capacity to reply instead of respond. This may appear straightforward in theory, but requires practice in standard of living. Envision getting unforgiving feedback at work. A receptive reaction may well be to be protective or lash out. But an impassive reaction would include pausing, considering whether the feedback is valid, and at that point choosing a useful way to address it. The key contrast here is the nearness of self-awareness and ponder activity. When we react instead of react, we can superior adjust our activities with our values. This doesn't cruel, stifling feelings or imagining they do not exist. Rather, IT implies understanding that whereas feelings are a portion of the human experience, they do not ought to control our behavior. A impassive reaction recognizes the emotion, reflects on the situation, and acts agreeing to reason, wisdom, and values. The part of reflection in stolid thought. Reflection plays an essential part in Stoicism. Epictetus, another unmistakable stolid philosopher, once said, "It's not what happens to you, but how you respond to it that things." This articulation highlights that it's not outside circumstances that direct our encounter of life, but or maybe how we select to translate and react to those circumstances. Reflection permits us to remove ourselves from prompt driving forces and emotions, giving us the space to form contemplated choices. In practice, This might cruel setting aside time each day to reflect on how you've dealt with circumstances. Did you respond impulsively, or did you react astutely? What can you learn from these encounters? This propensity of day-by-day reflection, often alluded to as self-examination by the Stoics, helps to construct enthusiastic strength over time. The more we hone this, the more naturally we'll be able to reply mindfully in future situations. Creating enthusiastic strength, reacting instead of responding, is significant to building passionate flexibility. Life is full of adversity, whether it's the misfortune of a job, the conclusion of a relationship, or individual disappointment. Stoicism educates us that we cannot dodge hardship, but able to control how we handle it. By reacting with resilience, we can turn challenges into openings for development. Strength isn't around maintaining a strategic distance from torment or imagining that hardships do not influence us. It's approximately recognizing the reality of the situation and choosing a reaction that adjusts with our values. A stolid reaction to misfortune doesn't overlook the trouble of the circumstance, but chooses to center on what can be controlled. When confronted with an obstacle, instead of staying on what has gone wrong, the Stoic intellect centers on what can be done to move forward. This attitude move can lead to a more constructive, solution-oriented approach to life's troubles. Seneca, in his letters, often talked around the significance of planning the intellect for inescapable hardships. He exhorted his understudies to rationally practice worst-case scenarios, not to stay in negativity, but to be rationally arranged for life's challenges. This practice, called premeditatio malorum, deliberation of evils, helps to construct enthusiastic flexibility by normalizing misfortune as a part of life, rather than being caught off guard by misfortune. The stolid is ready to reply with calm. Reasoned activity, the control of choice. The extreme takeaway from impassive reasoning is that we continuously have a choice, whereas we may not be able to. We can control this understanding freely. It places control of immovable rather than being at a lenience. When we pause, fronted, practice, grasp,